Yeah, hello everybody. My name is Peter Manuel, spokesperson for FLAG SA, Food Producers Landowners Action Group South Australia. FLAG SA was set up with a group of business people and farmers really concerned about what's happening to our food bowl, food producers and our rights. I'd like to thank all of you for coming here today, and I know you've given up your precious time and resources to get here, and it's much appreciated. And I'd like to thank the Victor Harbour Harness Racing Club, Lou Parker, President, Keith Joy, Vice President, and his committee for getting this venue ready for us today. It's absolutely fantastic. Also, John Ellers for letting us use his prime mover to get this stage here today and helping out with the audio. DS Lighting and Audio, Daryl Stevens, and the Encounter Bay Football Club for handling the food and the drinks, and also Daryl Robinson Steel. He's been absolutely fantastic. I'd like to introduce to you Grace Borden, who was the runner-up in Australia's Got Talent in 2008, and she's going to sing the national anthem. Thank you.
Like you want to sing with me? Okay. Australians, oh let us rejoice, for we are young and free, with golden soil and wealth for toil. Our home is good by sea. Our land abounds in nature's gifts of beauty rich and rare. In history's page let every stage advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair. Beneath our radiant southern cross we'll toil with hearts and hands to make this commonwealth of ours renowned of all the lands. For those who've come across the seas with boundless plains to share, with courage let us all combine to advance Australia fair. In joyful strains then let us sing, advance Australia fair.
I used to be able to sing like that. I'd like to introduce John Daly, MLC, who's going to chair the rally today. And gee, I tell you what, this guy is unbelievable. He speaks in layman's terms and he's a real statesman, and I've got the utmost respect for him. So I'd like to welcome John Daly, MLC.
Thank you, Peter. And once again, thanks, Grace. I mean, that act takes some beating. First of all, I'd like to acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues who are here today, the Honourable Michelle Lenzik, Shadow Minister for the Environment, the Honourable Anne Bressington, MLC, Mr Mitch Williams, Deputy Leader of the Liberal Party, Mr Michael Pengilly, Member for Finnis, and Senator Cory Bernardi. I'd like to also acknowledge apologies from Isabel Redman, Leader of the Liberal Party, Senator Nick Xenophon, Bob Catter, MP, As you're probably aware, following some developments last week, Nick Xenophon was to chair this meeting, but because of the intervention of James Packer into the pokey debate, he's unable to be here. The first speaker today is the Honourable Michelle Lenzig, Shadow Minister for the Environment and Conservation. Please welcome Michelle.
Thank you, John. And can I acknowledge my parliamentary colleagues and also Mr. Peter Manuel. Peter's done an outstanding job of raising this issue with members of Parliament and with the community and getting this on the agenda. He's been fearless in ringing Talkback Radio, attending public meetings and standing up for the rights of landholders and for organising today, and I'd like to pay tribute to Peter for all his hard work. Well done. This is the second flag rally that I've attended. I attended the meeting at Strathalbyn, as a lot of you would, and Isabel, our leader, got up and spoke there, and I think she made her views on this issue pretty well known. She's pretty fed up with a lot of the ideological agendas that have been going on that are driven under the banner of environmental issues, and being a Hills representative and a person who represents a large part of the Fleurieu, she's well aware of these issues, and she's been attending a lot of meetings right from the start when water prescription in the Adelaide Hills first was put on the agenda. And so the water prescription that's taking place in the eastern and western Mount Lofty ranges, we believe that when there's less than 10% of the sub-catchments are under stress, why would you apply the same rules across the board to areas that are pressured as to those that aren't? And as you know, there's a lot of issues with how the NRM boards are going about trying to impose rules on everyone. It's resulting in lost production. There's a lack of understanding of how landowners actually manage their resources and in a sustainable way. I mean, we appreciate that you guys want to have a resource that you can continue farming into the future, so you don't want to kill the goose that lays the golden egg, and in fact are already doing things sustainably. All the control is in the hands of the NRM boards, and they want to take away all the rights of landowners to manage their properties in a sustainable way, and we don't agree with that. And along with my colleagues in the Upper House, we've been trying to amend the Natural Resource Management Act to bring some common sense into this approach. And it's really unfortunate that the Parliament has to try and legislate for common sense. That shouldn't be our job. That should be what's happening naturally. So there's a whole lot of amendments, and I've spoken to FLAG. There's a document on my website which talks about all the things that I think are wrong with the NRM Act. And unfortunately, it's a bit of a case for the Liberal Party of we told you so, not to you guys, but to the Parliament and to the people of South Australia. When the amalgamation of the water catchment boards, the pest plant and soil boards came about in 2004, we said it's going to be bureaucratic, there's too much power that's placed in the boards and in the minister, and it's going to be very, very costly. And what have we got? We had amendments that weren't supported in the Upper House, so some of those things went through, including to do with powers of authorised officers, and so those are all things that we're trying to pull back while we're certainly from the Upper House. My personal view, I've been Shadow Minister for the Environment for about 4 years, and I don't think any environment agency should ever be put solely in charge of anything that's going to have an economic impact on anyone. And it's not just this, it's marine parks, it's anywhere where people are involved in sustainable production or sustainable yield from the oceans, as they are in marine parks, where the environment agencies just have been allowed to run off on a merry frolic without any reference to the Department of Primary Industries, who have a lot more understanding of what's going on. So that's, if we win office in 2014 and I'm the Environment Minister, that'll be front of mind for me. I've got a very simple message for the people today. Nothing will change unless the government changes in 2014, because the Labor Party does not understand people in regional areas. They don't care what happens north of Jepps Cross or south of the tollgate, because they never win any seats outside of the metropolitan area. So they continuously pander to all sorts of issues which might sound good to people in the burbs, but impact on you directly. And their minister, I'm sure you'll hear more about Minister Kuika throughout this meeting, but Minister Kuika doesn't have a clue. And he doesn't need to have a clue, because he doesn't have any country members who come knocking on his door saying, "Minister, do you realise this is hurting the people of South Australia?" There's no impact to the Labor Party. They just don't care about Labor people, about country people. They only care about people in the suburbs and trendy issues. So I want you to take the lead of people like Peter. You need to ring Talkback Radio, you need to bombard the newspapers, you need to make sure that Metropolitan Adelaide understands that you're hurting. I think it's a fantastic job that you've done so far raising this issue, but remember 2014, if Labor gets back in, this will just go on the same again and again and again. And as I said, it's not just this issue, it's marine parks, because they will let their bureaucrats run along and do whatever they want, and they will not protect your interests. So good on you, and keep on going.
Thank you, Michelle. Before I introduce our next speaker, I omitted to mention that Adrian Pedrick was an apology, and then my colleague, Honourable Robert Brokenshire, reminded me that he was here, so I acknowledge his attendance. The next speaker is the Honourable Anne Bressington, independent member of the Legislative Council.
I'm too short for this. Well, first of all, welcome to all of you, and good on you for coming out here and having your voice heard on this most important issue of our natural resources, our farming and food producing situation, and as Michelle said, marine parks and anything else that has to do with our food bowl and food production. I also want to pay tribute to Flag SA for organising this event and also the meeting at Strathalbyn, and to Peter Manuel specifically, because he's the one I've had the most to do with. Peter is a dynamo, and I can tell you all that it is refreshing to have someone lobby me as a Member of Parliament with a real live issue that affects the entire state and perhaps the entire country. Peter is doing this because this is the right thing to do, and he recognises, and so does his board and his members, that if we don't pull this up now, that we are going to get to a point where we will never be able to wind this back. And I think probably for each and every one of you who aren't a member of Flag SA at the moment, that whether you're from the country or whether you're from the city, that perhaps membership to this organisation is warranted, because this organisation is standing up for not only farmers and food producers, but also for we people in the city. If you look on your rates notices, you will see that each and every one of us from the city pay an NRM levy as well. And these people, given the time and given the authority, which I don't doubt will happen under a Labor government, will be able to come into our homes at any time and do environment and energy inspections. This is already happening in the United States, people. You have to have audits done on your home, and you pay a non-compliance fee if you don't allow them into your home or into your business to do these audits. And if you don't comply within 14 days, then you suffer hefty fines and your businesses are closed and your homes are closed. The one thing that I want all of you to understand is this isn't just happening in South Australia, it's not just happening in Australia. This environmental movement, this green agenda, is a global movement. And all we have to do, as I said, is look to America, and make no mistake, if we don't pull this up now and we don't stand our ground, we probably have 3 or 4 years before we're in the state that they're in. And I was reading an article the other evening where in America now, the number of people on the land in America is down to 16% of what it was a decade ago. Their farmers are walking off the land because of this bureaucratic red tape, and also because of the non-compliance fines, and everything that's happening here has already happened there. It's already happened in Canada. And I urge all of you to don't just listen to mainstream media and your politicians to get your information. You need to be out there sourcing information for yourselves and knowing what's going on, because, you know, mainstream media is not telling us the truth. It's not telling us what's going on. So my information, my advice to all of you, number one, is to join up FLAG as soon as possible and give them the people power that they need to be able to carry this forward. The second thing is there are five YouTube documentaries that I believe every Australian should watch and understand. And they're only low budget docos, but they're made by people like yourselves who are in these situations that they've got no other way of getting word out there. And the first one is The World According to Monsanto. Watch it and understand it. We're talking now about lifting the ban on GM foods in South Australia. Know what that means. Know what it means. The second one is, What on Earth Are They Spraying? A very important video for all of us to watch about our air and our water. The next one is Food Inc. And the other one is, of course, Gasland. You know, if all of this stuff that we're doing about natural resources had anything to do with preserving the environment at all, would we be allowing coal seam gas mining in this country, where it takes the environment 1,000 years to recover? No, we would not. These NRM initiatives, native vegetation initiatives, are a little bit like our carbon tax. Got nothing to do with the environment, but a lot to do with revenue raising and building bureaucracies. Ladies and gentlemen, I urge all of you to stand up and be heard. Write to your politicians, email your politicians, ring your politicians, be a pain in the bum. Be a pimple on their bum, and don't go away until this madness and this insanity is righted. And I agree with Michelle that if Labor get back in, this will roll out more and more and more. So think in 2014, but between now and 2014, take as much action as you can to make sure that your rights to farm and your rights to produce food are acknowledged and enforced. And I hope that people in the cities wake up before it's too late and jump behind this particular initiative and these protests, these rallies, because united we stand, divided we fall. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Anne. Our next speaker is the Honourable Robert Brokenshire from Family First. Please welcome Robert.
Thanks very much, John, and it's good to see you all here this morning on what is one of the most diverse food bowls of any peninsula in this state and indeed this nation, and that's the Fleurieu Peninsula. And that's a message that we need to start to get through to the government if they want us to continue to produce food. I acknowledge and thank FLAG for the work that they've done, their whole committee. I've known Peter Manuel for years. You know, there'll be people in the audience here, just a few, that'll be spies from the government today, and I say now because I don't want this being used against me. Yes, I am a farmer as well as a politician, and I'm very, very proud to be a farmer. And I don't apologise for the conflict of interest. Today I have my son here and my father-in-law. My son is the 4th generation to breed Roslyn Vale Jerseys on this peninsula. I would like to think, and I'm sure you would too, that if he has a son or a daughter, they'll be having an opportunity to be the 5th generation to breed those Roslyn Vale Jerseys. But I don't say lightheartedly that right at the moment that is under threat. And that's why I'm here with my parliamentary colleagues and supporting FLAG. I don't see a bunch of red raggers out here that I hear in the Parliament corridors I see people that want to right a wrong, and that's why I'm here to support Peter Manuel and Flag and my colleagues. This is not about red rag extreme right. This is about righting a wrong. This is about stopping the Greens and those with a socialist agenda to undo food production in this state and nation, and it's time we stood up. And if we don't, then we're all irresponsible too. You're not irresponsible, that's why you're here today, but we need to get that message across. I want to talk about two things. One about obviously the natural resource management matters that concern a lot of us, and secondly I want to talk about food sovereignty for Australia and indeed for our state. And I want to say at the start, Jay Weatherill wants to have a fairly easy ride in the next 2 years, and he'll get a honeymoon. We're seeing it already. We saw it in the print in the last week and on the televisions. But he's got to do more than just say he's going to listen. In the South Australian Parliament, where I spent 13 years in the lower house before coming into the upper house, the carpet is not only green, the carpet has wine grapes and wheat sheaf all over it. And you know why that has that there? Because this state has been underpinned by agriculture since it was colonised. And whilst we need to be mining as well, the fact is that if we have government that's focused, we have a wonderful opportunity to value add sustainable food production for our state, our nation, and to export into our trading partners. CHOGM is on at the moment, the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting. Julia Gillard has been saying a lot. I didn't hear her say one thing though about food production, about food sustainability. I did hear the Queen, by the way, in her speech, in a key part of it, talk about food production. So the Queen of England, the Queen of Australia understands about the importance, but our Prime Minister clearly doesn't. And I think that's an indictment on where this government is right now. Now let's just touch for a moment on the NRM. We were hoodwinked in the Parliament by the Rann, Weatherill Cabinet and Government when they put through NRM, which was to combine water, soil, pest plants and feral animals. That's what it was about, and it was supposed to make things more efficient. Well, with over $100 million now being paid by all of us that pay a levy as property owners, and over 300 bureaucrats there, I've seen little improvement in soil conservation, water conservation and addressing pest plants and feral animals. Now yes, the government will say to you, they'll say, well, we're not going to put meters on stock of domestic dams and bores. Well, we damn well know you're not going to do that. And you know why they won't do that? Because that'd be a death sentence straight out for the next term that they want, when they want 16 years in this government, as a Labor government. But when it comes to irrigators, and yes, I'm one of them, they want us to put water meters on our irrigation dams, on our irrigation creeks and on our bores at our expense, and then they want to start to tax us and charge us for the water. You know, the land here is diverse and opportunistic, and we are blessed with high rainfall and good water supply. But we pay for that when we buy the land. That's why irrigation land, fully developed, is $10,000 to $11,000 an acre here. You know, it's not $700 an acre in marginal cropping country where you don't have that water. You and all of us have paid for that, and now the government want to tax and charge that. On top of that, they want to implement low-flow bypasses. Now there's an argument whether the science even works with low-flow bypasses, but in the public good, when the government can put $43 million into a film studio when it should be going into mental health, when they can find $500 million plus because the AFL come over here and say they want a stadium in Adelaide, then for the public good, they can pay for the water meters as far as I'm concerned, because that's what my constituents are telling me. How dare them try and tax us for the water, and if they want to have a practice with low-flow bypasses, well, they can damn well pay for that as well, if they want to be governing for everybody and showing some equity. And at the moment, their city-centric approach is not governing for South Australia. And I encourage you to talk to our city cousins, because, Mr Weatherill, if you want Don Dunstan's plan for this peninsula, which was to turn it into a holiday playground, damn well tell us now, and we'll shut our tractors down, we'll stop milking, we'll stop growing food, and if your agenda is to bring more and more food in from overseas, and particularly from China, with all the disease risks and everything else we know that are there, then tell us you don't want food producers. But if you do want food producers, if you do want jobs, and if you do want opportunities for growth in this state, then get out of our way and let us get on and farm. And I hope that there is another protest by you and thousands more that Flag and others have right on the steps of Parliament in 6 months' time, and go right in the face of the government if they haven't listened. Because Mr Weatherill, as I said, says he's going to listen. Well, let's listen by bringing the amendments and the bill into the House that all of us behind, and including myself, have, that other speakers have spoken about. And one other amendment that I'm going to put forward is that I want to change the Act from the Natural Resource Management Act, and I want it to be called the Sustainable Farming and Natural Resource Management Act, so that the Greens and the others that are working against us understand from the title of that bill that it's about the focus of sustainable farming and the environment. And I want to finish just with a couple of other points. I challenge anybody in the bureaucracy or this government to show us that we are environmental vandals as farmers. That's a nonsense. We cannot sustain generation after generation if we're environmental vandals. In fact, a lot of the water conservation, tree conservation and soil degradation has been fixed up by those of us that are farmers. And I want to finish on the food production and the food sovereignty, because I applaud and commend any effort to get some balance back into the NRM. And I say for those that are here from the government today in the crowd, none of us are opposed to the principles of NRM, but you've gone way to the left, you've got out of kilter, and we're not going to put up with it. And finally, I want to touch on food sovereignty. We're losing our manufacturing, our traditional manufacturing. But within 40 years, when we see the world with not 7 billion people that we have today, but over 9 billion and possibly 10 billion people, and where we're being told as farmers that in 40 years we're going to have to double food production, isn't that where the jobs are going to be? Aren't we the best farmers in the world? Haven't we shown how to do dry land farming better than anyone else? Aren't we having some of the best research and development opportunities up until now where the cuts are occurring, allowing us to grow that food? That's where our future is. Because when China and India finish building their infrastructure, they won't be paying premium prices for those ores and those mineral bodies, you know. They'll be screwing those people that own those mines then, but they'll be damn hungry. They're coming over here, China, India, Germany and others, and buying our land. I say, when it comes to water and agricultural land, it's not for sale, it belongs to Australians and we must own it. And yet when I wrote to Penny Wong, and I said, Penny Wong, there's $500 million of American money in the Canary Islands where there's a tax haven, wanting to buy irrigators' water at a time when they've had 6 years of drought and the banks are shaking them by you know where. Why are you allowing this? And she wrote back to me and she said, Robert, they're only going to be buying about 5% of the water. Perhaps 5% this year, another 5% next year, and before we know it, they will own most of our water and a lot of our farmland, and we have let our families and our future generations down. Let's not do that. Let's make today the start of a fight until we get governments in this country that govern for all Australians and govern for future generations, not for the next election. Thank you.
Thank you, Robert. Our next speaker is Mr. Peter White, President of the South Australian Farmers Federation. Please welcome Peter.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for this opportunity. The Farmers Federation seems to be working on this issue for an enormous amount of time, and it's great to see, and I congratulate Flag on taking up the issue. The bigger the fight, the more chance we've got of changing it. I mean, most people would actually agree that water is a precious resource and it has to be managed in a sustainable way. But the principles under the NRM Act to actually deliver that are just outrageous and unacceptable. Principles like the government actually own the rain, so therefore they can tax it and control it. A principle that says that the community's going to benefit, but the landholders have the financial responsibility to deliver it. A principle that says that you can have a cow that comes down to the dam and drink and it's not taxable. But if you take that water, put it on the ground and grow grass and the cow eats the grass, it is taxable. Only a bureaucrat would think like that. Normal people just don't think like that. The principle that says that the officers of NRM have more power of access to your properties than the police is just totally outrageous. A principle that says that you are guilty as a breach of this Act until you prove yourself innocent is totally against the Constitution and the belief of most Australians. This is South Australia 2011. It is not Germany in 1942. A principle that says if you breach this Act, you will be fined to a heavier extent than most of those under the Criminal Code. But the real issue is, once these principles are established in legislation, it is just the stroke of the pen that takes us away from a handful of dams at the moment they want to do it, to every single dam, rainwater tank and bore right across this state, including the metropolitan area. Now, I've mentioned that to them on a number of occasions. They throw their hands up in the air and say, look, we're not thinking about that, we'll never do that. How many of us here today thought we'd be here 5 years ago debating this issue right now? So I don't think we can actually trust them. Look, agriculture is the single biggest contributor to the state's economy, and yet we had Premier Rand stand up and say what a wonderful job agriculture did last year, how great it was to see the harvest as good as it was, then turned around in the budget and cut every single thing that would underpin agriculture. And the NRM Act, the way it is, it's just cutting the guts out of agriculture in this state. Look, you've all heard the saying, hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help you. Well, if this is your idea of help, please stop helping us.
Thank you, Peter. Now, we have a number of people from interstate here because, as both Anne and Robert and Michelle have mentioned, this is not just a state issue, this is a national issue. Would you please welcome Joanna Ray, who's the President of Property Rights Australia from Rockhampton, Queensland.
Hello everyone, and thank you very much for coming. I've come from Queensland because a lot of the things that you're facing here we already have in Queensland, but let me start at the beginning. Kate Jennings, Australian writer and self-confessed greenie, based in New York, has recently written, "The demonising of farmers has been insidious in the last decade, but reached a crescendo this last year when the Murray-Darling Basin Authority's guide to the proposed basin plan was released. All 1,118 pages of it, with production values as high as a Mercedes-Benz brochure, and a minuscule contingent of angry irrigators, arch villains du jour, burned copies in Griffith." End of quote. The demonising has actually been happening for more than a decade, and all green groups have been involved at some stage or other. The question is why, what is the real agenda, and does it matter? Well, yes. It's not just a matter of sticks and stones. They do it because sidelining the true environmentalists allows them to raise money, lots of it, millions in America to save the Great Barrier Reef from a non-existent threat for the wild WWF. That it also gives them a chance to push their unfriendly green agendas and at the moment to be the politicians who hold the balance of power. They have often done this through misrepresentation of various sorts, often about the science involved, denigration of individuals or classes of people, and influence on funding for researchers who don't agree with them. They plead social justice, unless the social justice required is for our food producers. In that case, they have shown again and again that they do not care about either their viability nor their lives. Australian male-ruled suicides are the most numerous in the Western world. Do these ranters for social justice care? No. They just want to bring on the laws that destroy property rights along with people's lives and businesses. In Queensland, landowners are dealing with the Vegetation Management Act, where current prosecutions are underway. The Wild Rivers Act, environmental risk management plans for the Great Barrier Reef, and recently proposed strategic cropping land legislation, which promises to put unreasonable restrictions on farmers, but will probably be largely avoided by the coal seam gas industry and quite probably mining for years to come. There are many examples of the injustices perpetrated by all of these acts, but one of the clearest cut is the example of the Great Barrier Reef. Dr. Jennifer Morahasi has written in 2002, the Great Barrier Marine Park Authority published a report that basically said the reef was in good shape. The World Wildlife Fund representative objected and demanded the report be rewritten. As Dr. Morahasi points out, when WWF says jump, governments say how high. Eventually, the Queensland Department of Environment and Resource Management commissioned a report by a specialist environmental consultancy called Marston Jakeman Associates. They clearly stated, unlike the WWF and the state and federal governments, that urban areas were actually responsible for the most pollutants entering the Great Barrier Reef Lagoon, but that it was cheaper to target farmers than retrofit urban sewage plants and get towns to modify their practices. Well, the National Water Commission says that conventionally treated municipal wastewater effluent contains a wide variety of trace chemical contaminants, including heavy metals, synthetic industrial organic chemicals, volatile organics, pesticides, their metabolites, algal toxins, disinfection byproducts, radionuclides, pharmaceuticals, estrogenic and androgenic hormones, antiseptics, and the list goes on. Figures for pollutants supposedly caused by farm runoff were modelled, not actuals. Unsurprisingly, when actuals were available, they were often half the modelled figures. Did this cause farmers to be excused from completing their risk management plans? No. Premier Anna Bligh has threatened to run an election campaign against farmers and their alleged pollution of the reef. So the demonisation is not confined to the green groups, but the politicians get in on it as well. And in Queensland, it is rife. Farmers were singled out. The mining community, urban areas and recreational uses were meant to be handled separately. This never happens. The same technique of regulating farmers first, with promises that other industries will be managed under separate legislation, has been used with strategic cropping land. It remains to be seen how equally the burden of the legislation will fall on different sectors of the economy. My guess is that farmers will find the restrictions onerous. Strategic cropping land legislation was actually asked for by the farming community to protect our valuable and rare cropping land, just 4% of our land area from damage by mining and coal seam gas extraction. Indications so far are that there will be enough exceptions built into any legislation that the impacts on mining and coal seam gas projects are likely to be ones of process rather than practicality. Our desperate for money state government has approached the coal seam gas issue with its typically cynical attitude. Where farmers have had to observe the precautionary principle for decades so that if any action may cause harm to the environment, as adjudicated by the noisiest green groups quite often, no science involved, they have not been permitted to perform that action. Little is known or published about the science of coal seam gas extraction, so our state government has adopted the adaptive precautionary principle, which means we'll see how it all goes and do something when the situation becomes untenable. They have taken this approach with millions and millions of tonnes of salt, which will be produced by this process and no one knows what to do with. One company's actually suggested it will store it in underground tanks. Millions of tonnes. Does anyone have any idea of the size required for that tank? There is some evidence, it's not only some evidence now, it's absolutely definite, that the state government has given at least one company permits to empty large quantities of various chemicals, including salts and heavy metals, over an 18-month period into the headwaters of the Murray-Darling Basin, namely the Condamine River. So much for the environment. Our chorus of noisy greens have said nothing. The state government has taken this duplicitous approach with the water tables of the aquifers both within and without the Great Artesian Basin. For decades now, irrigators have had their water entitlements cut back without compensation to preserve the integrity of the aquifer, and the process is ongoing. Coal seam gas has the government legislated right to take or interfere with as much underground water as it likes, unmetered and unpaid for. CSIRO and the National Water Commission have both expressed concerns about the cumulative effects of multiple coal seam gas operations on the water table. To these companies, water is a waste product. Once they have finished with it, and what to do with it is as yet an unsolved problem, with the Senate inquiry into the management of the Murray-Darling Basin asking repeatedly why anyone would want the water just released into the environment, even treated by osmosis, or pumped back underground when they do not know its composition or its effects, particularly in aquifers used for drinking water. Our recent legal advice to farmers who are to have mining or coal seam gas companies on their land is to familiarise themselves with the environmental authorities issued for their area and be prepared to enforce them by taking mining companies to court. Where are the regulators? Why is DERM, Department of Resource Management, not breathing down their necks and prosecuting when they have breached their authorities? Why should landowners be advised to do it? Why do they have to pay? DERM certainly have no compunction in prosecuting landowners who may have breached an unfair and much amended, 300 amendments, most of them retrospective, Vegetation Management Act 1999, and the Crime and Misconduct Commission is not interested in instances of fabrication of evidence or perjury. We've been there, done that, it hasn't worked. Greedy, short-sighted, visionless politicians are putting our food security at risk for the warm feeling they get from being feted by environmentalists and mining companies who promise gold. Someone today has already spoken about the food task. Politicians, green groups are not interested in the food task. The question is why? What is the agenda? This is a productive country. Why are they closing down all the productivity measures that we have developed over the years? Someone also has said, oh, NRM wants to take away the defence of being silent when you're interviewed by NRM, and the onus of the reversal of the onus of proof. This has already happened in Queensland. under the Vegetation Management Act 1999, and there has been barely a squeak. Professor Suri Ratnapala from Queensland University is an exception, and he has written extensively on the unfairness of all these changes in how the laws are applied. Queensland is the only legal jurisdiction in the world to use satellite imagery which has not been ground truthed for law enforcement. The images are not like photos and require skill and experience to read, and the inaccuracies of the maps is notorious. Nevertheless, having been challenged in court, they now have amended the legislation so that the Certified Vegetation Management Act is the map. Too bad if it's wrong, too bad if it says it has vegetation on your place that you do not have on your place. The map is the map, and the law says that that is the map. I think perhaps I've possibly said enough, but what I would like to say is stand your ground, don't give in, and get involved in the social media on the internet. It is a powerful, powerful tool. Thank you.
Thank you, Joanne. Now we're going to have a slight break at the moment. The television crew are about to take off, and that's going to create a bit of noise, so we won't endeavour to speak against that. What I would suggest you do, the moment they take off, wave your arms, put up your placards, because they're going to take aerial shots of the whole occasion. Thank you very much, everyone. Our next speaker is David McCabe, National President of the DLP.
Thanks very much, Peter, and thanks for your patience. Before I begin today, I'd just like to apologise on behalf of Senator John Madigan, who's current Democratic Labor Party Senator for the state of Victoria. He was going to be here today. Unfortunately, commitments in Ballarat have kept him there. I can tell you he was in Yallourn last week speaking to the people, the families and communities down in Yallourn in Victoria, and he asked the people to support him, which is along the lines of our party policy, to recommission the State Electricity Commission of Victoria without compensation. Effectively what that means is to nationalise the power supply and give it back to the Australian people so that they own it again. I know he was well received over there, and it's one of the policies of our party. Because we're a real Labor Party, not like that mob in town at the moment. My name is David McCabe. My wife is Christine. We have 4 children. There are 3 things that can guarantee an argument in our family around the dinner table, and that's religion, sport and politics. We effectively have an argument every night. As a father, I think it's my responsibility to ensure that our children are informed and have the ability to and the opportunity to debate the issues affecting their lives in an open and caring environment, and we still do that in our family. The reason we're here today, and one of the things I wanted to talk about, is that over the past few years we've been bombarded with a very slick campaign portraying the fact that our world is heading for disaster. And this is based on a science they've manufactured. This science is called climate change. I'm not going into a treatise about that today, but I do want to say 2 things that are important. The people who produced that report lied to the world about the impact of climate change. The second thing I want to say today is human impact on climate change in the world is negligible. We have effectively been fed a steady diet of fear over these past few years, and we're now beginning to see the impact of that fear. The peoples who draft laws and legislate in Australia are afraid. Now, my mother used to say, you never make a decision when you're emotional, because it generally leads to bad decisions. And for the past 3 years, I have, as a normal citizen, I have seen nothing but bad decisions come out of North Terrace. I'd like to introduce you and of course say welcome to the politics of fear. Don't get me wrong here, we need to be good stewards of our planet, and we need to look after our resources. And I believe that we can do better, but I don't believe taxing us will achieve it, and legislating for it is definitely going too far. I think what we have achieved in politics is a measure of believing a story, and our politicians, particularly our Labor and our Green politicians, have swallowed this line hook, line and sinker. You have probably heard, I know I've definitely heard, the statement being made, the science is settled. And there is one thing I can guarantee you, it isn't. A forecast is still a forecast. I looked at my phone on Thursday and it said it's going to be fine on Friday, and it'll be fine on Saturday, and it'll be warm on Sunday. I looked at my phone because I got the weather on my phone, which is really impressive. It tells me it's going to rain on Friday, and it did. But Thursday it told me it was going to be fine. A forecast is a forecast. It's a prediction about the future, and this mob in there at the moment are not predicting anything very well at all. I think they should stick to stuff they know or think they know about, which is infrastructure. Let's improve and ensure that we have an adequate water supply. Let's ensure that we have improved and had an adequate power supply. Let's improve and ensure we have adequate transport systems to be enable us to move around and to prosper and grow as a community. This fear that they have engendered is something you have to believe in. It requires belief, and there's only one other entity I know which requires this level of belief, and that's called religion. And now we are entering the science or the politics of religion, and their latest sport is farmers. Now, I've been a city slicker all my life, but I have all my relatives are from the country. We settled Lameroo, Pinaroo area in my family, and that's where my mum came down from. And I have a great love of the country, and I've still got a lot of relatives up there and up north as well, and I still catch up with them all. And I have the greatest respect and admiration for our farmers coming from a city environment. I believe they know how to farm. They have had generations, and as Rob Brokenshire pointed out, generations of dry farming. We're probably the best dry farmers. We are the best farmers that I know of in the world, and I fully support our farmers. I believe that they look after the land that they work and live on, because it is their livelihood, and they do want to pass it on to their children. And I believe it's their right to do that. As it's already been said, and we've had a lot of speakers today, I know that they're good farmers, and I know that our government needs to stand aside and let our farmers do what they do best, and that is producing our food. And I think we do it better than anyone else. Like Peter today, and as a normal citizen of our country, I'm sick and tired of one side of major politics standing up and saying we'll do this and we'll do this and we'll introduce this legislation, only to have the opposite major political party stand up and say, we disagree with this and we don't believe this and we're going to get rid of this. So you've got one side of major politics putting legislation in, and you've got the other side of politics taking that legislation out. So effectively the net result is of 10 or 15 or 20 years of politics is zero. And this is what is actually coming out of our government at the moment. As I said before, I think our government's primary responsibility is in fact the infrastructure that allows Australians to get on and build Australia. We are the wealth of Australia. We own this country. And we actually need to teach our children this, and we need to make our friends and our relatives in Adelaide and throughout the state aware that this is our country. We do own it, and we are not going to have any government give it away for us. Thanks for your time.